Okay, I'm back with another presentation on the fill with spoke cutting and threading machine. I got many requests on how to properly set the spoke machine so I can cut 12 gauge through 15 gauge spokes. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to show you how to properly set up the machine so I can cut all four size gauge spokes, 12 through 15 gauge spokes. Okay, so just pay close attention. I'll try to take my time, do it slow so you can see, and you won't have any issues with your machine. Later on in the video, I will also share some of the common problems. Sometimes the spokes, the threads don't come out properly, and then you can't thread on the nipple. And I'll explain why that happens sometimes. So for now, I will go ahead and start. We'll start with the 15 gauge spoke. I have all four setup spacers here. I have 12 gauge, 13 gauge, 14 gauge, and 15 gauge. Okay, so when we come over here, you have the 3 bolts that you loosen. Once you loosen the 3 bolts, the machine will drop. The frame itself will drop. You get the setup spacer that you're going to use. The setup spacer will go in between the block and the slide. Once you have it in place, you then put your hand on the frame itself. You bring the lever back, making sure that the setup spacer is locked in. Okay, and then you will rest your hand on the frame itself. You will rock the machine back and forth, the frame, and you'll notice that you'll find the center spot where it's flat, and once you find that center spot, you go ahead and tighten the 3 bolts. You pull the setup spacer out, and you should be ready to go. Okay, so I'll start with that first process. Okay, frame drop. .15 gauge setup spacer in between the slide and the block. Bring the arm straight towards you. Hand on the frame. Back, forward. It's in the center. Tighten the bolts. Take out your setup spacer. .15 gauge spoke. 1.8. Once you figure out the length you need, you put the spoke on the spoke holder. Okay. You lift the arm lever up, cuts the spoke, no threads. The flipper engages, puts the spoke into place nice and straight. Then you just bring the arm back down. And that's it. 10 millimeters of thread. 15 gauge nipple. Notice how it goes on very smooth. Okay, that's a 15 gauge spoke. Now next I'll go to the 14 gauge. Frame drops. 14 gauge setup spacer. out the setup spacer. 14 gauge spoke, 2.0. You notice the movable cutter as I move the cutter lever down. Fixed cutter, flipper. Cuts a piece off. You don't have to guide the spoke, hold the spoke. It should do everything on its own. 14 gauge, 10 millimeters of thread, 14 gauge nipple. Okay, nice and smooth. Now when you buy spokes from factory, their factory thread comes about 2.17, 2.18. This is a 2.0 spoke, and the fill wood gives deeper threads. Your thread should be about 2.27 to 2.28. This one is at 2.29, very deep thread. That enables you to thread on the nipple, a nice tighter fit. Next I'll go to the 13 gauge spoke. Notice it's very easy. Thirteen gauge setup spacer. Pull the setup spacer out. 13 gauge spoke, 2.29. Now when the spoke starts getting a little thicker, it does apply a little more pressure on the cutter and on the dies. So when you put the spoke on there, you want to give it a quick pop, pull the lever back a little quicker, so it cuts the spoke nice and smooth. Again, the spoke is straight. You shouldn't have to guide the spoke. The machine does everything. You just bring the lever back down. Again, very smooth. 10 millimeters of thread. 2.29. Thread depth is 2.58. Very smooth. Okay, now we'll move to the 12 gauge spoke, which is a 105 gauge. Commonly used on electric bicycles, motor scooters. This is the one that most people are having the most trouble with. 2.59, 2.6. Now if you don't have the 2.6 setup spacer, you can use a 2.3 and then use a 0.15 of an inch shim in the bottom. .6. Now the bolts don't have to be very tight, just nice and snug. Take out the setup spacer. Okay, 2.6. There's 2.29. Here it is. 2.6. Again, this is heavier gauge, so you want to be able to pop it. You don't want to just pull it slowly. It will still cut it, but you notice the spokes start to bend a little. So when you have it on here, when you cut it, just give it a quick pull. It's easier. Put it back on there. Now it's nice and straight. You shouldn't have to guide or hold the spoke. If you have to pull on the spoke back or forth to get a proper thread, that means the machine needs to be readjusted. You shouldn't have to do anything. Okay, 10 millimeters of thread. No cross threading. Now I do recommend every 15 to 20 spokes, put some more filled with oil on the dies themselves. You get the oil, goes in between the slide and the block. Get a spoke and just push the spoke into the dies. Lubricated the dies, and that's good for 15 to 20 spokes. The more oil, the better. Helps lubricate the dies and prevent premature wearing. Again, I'll do the 12 gauge spoke again. Pop it. Engages it. Again, you shouldn't have to guide. You should have zero waste on this machine. And then just bring the lever back down. Very easy. All the way to the top. Thread depth 2.88, nice and deep. One of the common problems you have, sometimes the reason why the threads don't come out correctly on the 12 gauge, there's a plunger inside of here and there's a spring inside the plunger. The plunger sometimes loses its strength, and so the flipper is not able to hold the spoke properly in place. So when you have the spoke on there, like so, as you start to bring the lever down, this flipper here should sustain the spoke in place. If once you bring the lever down, if you can move the flipper back and forth, that means you have a weak spring. It shouldn't come loose at all, like this one. And then you just roll it through. Now I bring it up, once it's locked in, bring it back down. You can go all the way around, but I find it much easier when you just come up, bring it straight down, and you're good to go.